the locks for the Panama Canal, the propeller for Lindbergh's Spirit of St. Louis, rails for the Trans-Siberia Railroad. All were forged of Pittsburgh steel.
Hello everybody and welcome back to The Point, your one-stop shop for all things sports, straight out of Pittsburgh and brought to you by the Penn and the Indiana University of Pennsylvania. Today we have a lot to talk about as always, and we welcome you back to the show for our third week here. We're going to jump right into it here with talking about the Defensive Player of the Year nomination that happened over the weekend with TJ Watt. TJ Watt getting snubbed his Defensive Player of the Year as the NFL decided to elect Aaron Donald his third Defensive Player of the Year. So to set this all into stone here, if you are not aware, TJ Watt led the league in sacks, putting up 15, 45 solo tackles as well, 10 assisted, and had 2 forced fumbles, an interception, and 7 deflected passes. On the other side, Aaron Donald, the winner of Defensive Player of the Year, only 13 and a half sacks. And granted, TJ Watt also played one last game, so led the league in sacks, one last game. Aaron Donald also 27 solo tackles, 18 assisted, 4 forced fumbles, and 1 recovered. But the big thing to talk about here is the fact that TJ Watt, one last game, led the league in sacks, and he was the favorite going in for this nomination, and he is absolutely snubbed of it. So he took it very personally and went right onto Twitter to post the kind of famed Michael Jordan meme now from The Last Dance, saying that he took that personally and took this personally. So his brother then went and backed him up, stating that he has a lot of respect for Aaron Donald, but eventually, when you look down at it, TJ Watt led the league in sacks here, and he was completely snubbed. Absolute joke that he is not given this nomination. So I'm going to ask you the question here, Brett. You are in the position of TJ Watt. You just absolutely crushed it again, being such a new, still young player in the league here, leading the league in sacks, playing one last game, completely defined the Steelers defense. I mean, Aaron Donald obviously does that for the Rams, but this was, a different world for TJ Watt for the Steelers. How do you react to this? How do you take that you were absolutely robbed of something that you should have earned? How do you react? What do you do?
Hey, you can't do much. You're just gonna have better next season, basically. He can tweet all that stuff and everything, but hey, it's not gonna change the voters or whoever decides on it. Like he should have won. Like it just doesn't make sense. You won it. Aaron Donald won it 3 times in a row.
Not in a row, 3 times in total. I don't think it was in a row, but 3 times total here.
3 times total. My mistake. 3 times total.
Why not give it to some? It's clear that TJ Watt is defining himself in the league. This would have been huge for him, just for the game of football, to give him this nomination as Defensive Player of the Year. Because when you look at the season for the Steelers, the offense was what completely defined their season. Their defense, yet again, was absolutely incredible, and TJ Watt being the front runner of that, even with Bud Dupree going down, even with Devin Bush getting injured, all of these linebackers getting injured, yet TJ Watt still showed that he could compete out there by himself without the support of others. So I'm completely on there with you, Brett, that, Aaron Donald, no disrespect to him, he played for the University of Pittsburgh. We love him at his University of Pittsburgh.
Great player, but I think TJ Watt just...
Of course, and I'm really confused on how this happened. I'm really, it was kind of the favorite. Everyone sitting here was waiting for this. But nonetheless, TJ Watt is completely robbed of this. We know that he will come back and show that he deserved to have this. But I don't know. If I'm TJ Watt in this situation, I have a lot of salt in my mouth for the league for completely staying, no, we're gonna go with Aaron Donald here. He played better than you, which again, no disrespect to Aaron Donald, but TJ Watt absolutely deserved this. I think if you're not even a Steelers fan, you know that he deserved this. And it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. It's a joke of the NFL that they just have to kind of stay on this trend of one player and they can't break out and favor somebody else for once. And I don't really, it's just embarrassing. It really is. And it's unfortunate.
I agree.
And we'll see. TJ Watt will prove them wrong going into next year and show them why he deserved it. And now moving on to the Super Bowl here, as all of you know, we had that over the weekend. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers facing off, and what a finish, what an absolute performance by Tampa Bay Buccaneers as Tom Brady captures his 7th ring, shows that he can leave New England, do it on his own, and just completely proved every single doubter wrong and did what everybody said was not possible, to go through, have a successful season in the NFC, make it through teams like the Saints and the Packers, move on to the Super Bowl, get that home Super Bowl, and ultimately get the win. A lot to break down here. Brett and I are going to tackle this because there is just so much to really cover here, and it really starts not even talking about the winners, but first talking about the losers in the Kansas City Chiefs, who were absolutely horrendous. This was an embarrassing performance by them as a team that has the offensive capability to just crush teams. And obviously, we knew that wasn't going to happen exactly here, but this was supposed to be an offensive showdown. And, their offensive line was horrendous. We know there were a lot of injuries there. Mahomes was stuck scrambling for most of this game, but the offensive line was terrible, getting beat left and right. And the Chiefs, I just think, were too mental in this game. They couldn't keep themselves in check. There was so much chippiness. Tyrann Mathieu just couldn't keep himself in check. They ended up taking unnecessary penalties. And that's kind of where I want to start here, the discussion here, Brett, with this trash talk with Tyrann Mathieu and Tom Brady and going back and forth. And it eventually led to the Chiefs they couldn't stay on page. They couldn't ground themselves. They looked like a bunch of just children that literally could not keep themselves together. And if you're in this situation, you're the Chiefs, the Buccaneers are just ruining you, and you're getting trash talked by Tom Brady. How do you respond to that?
Hey, you can't. You just got to play better. You just got to play better. And they didn't. They didn't play better. It seemed like a tough game just because of their injuries they had, but they should have done a lot better than they did.
And it's amazing that it was the injuries that we can say that played in it, because they made it to the Super Bowl through these injuries. I mean, as we were discussing before the show, and it was discussed in the broadcast, that only one of their offensive linemen was a starter from week one.
They had a guard, they had a tackle.
Injuries were definitely a huge part of this game, but again, I'm not going to take any of that into consideration, given that these teams made it here. These teams they fought through, they got through each conference. So I think that even though these injuries were there, I think it's a lot more, especially because, nothing showed of Tampa Bay. They played their best game of the year, best complete game. And there's a lot of people talking about that the refs weren't great, that they defined this game, that they were favoring the Chiefs. And listen, I'm, as someone that is we're Steelers fans, we've seen some of the worst officiating for us, especially against our rivals. The refs were not great in this game, but they didn't define this game by any mark. If you are someone that's trying to defend the Chiefs and defend Patrick Mahomes, saying that the referees define this, just stop. Just completely stop, because that is unnecessary. They put 9 points up. Yeah, there were some pass interference calls and whatnot. Yeah, you didn't score a touchdown, and the referees do not define if you score a touchdown or not, because a lot of these penalties were on the defense with a lot of pass interference calls, and they might
crucial pass interference calls. They were very big yardage.
And the thing is like, yeah, you can say, oh, that's not really pass interference, but if there's any tugging, if there's any pulling, holding, that's pass interference. Sometimes you give it away.
There was one that they tripped Gronk. And that was a bad one. I thought that was pass interference automatically. I was watching. I was like, pass interference. They're screwed.
Exactly. And I mean, even it's great that you bring up Gronk, because he had, I believe, 2 touchdowns. Yeah, because they set the record.
Absolutely amazing.
And
absolutely amazing.
One of the touchdowns he got was just completely. Brady ended up scrambling a little bit. All the receivers had ran their routes already, and Gronk just kind of broke off from his man and was standing wide open. And it's like, come on, and I believe it was Tyrann Mathieu that was covering him. But again, it wasn't the refs that defined this game. As you said, Brett, you can't win with 9 points. How are you going to, you have an explosive offense and it leads to this. And when it comes to talking about this game, the Chiefs just did not show up to play.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what it was. Like, looking at Patrick Mahomes in this game, something seemed off. Something seemed weird. He looked like beaten inside from like the start. He just didn't
nervous playing Brady. The Brady intimidation.
I don't know if, like you said, Mahomes potentially being nervous. But he was here last year. He made it to the Super Bowl. He'd done this, but it is a different aurora. It's a different feeling when you are up against Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback of all time. And Mahomes knows that he could potentially be that one day. And this was kind of his moment to show that. And year 2021, or I guess 2020, 2021 Super Bowl champions are the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot to think about this. We'd like to hear your comments, but Kansas City Chiefs, not sure how to think moving forward with that performance. And moving on to our second topic here today, recently coming out over the weekend that Paul George is now out indefinitely, no real time frame here, with a foot injury, as the Clippers really are taking a hit to their season right now as they are battling in the West behind the Lakers in third place. A lot to take from this. Paul George going down is a huge hit, as I said, for this Clippers team, as they are trying to solidify themselves and get on a trend right now. Brett, what does the loss of Paul George, now again, not a season thing here, this is indefinite, kind of just hoping he comes back weeks, months, whenever it might be. What does this mean for the Clippers in the NBA West?
The Clippers can still compete, but being that like number one contender, like versus the Lakers without Paul George, no, it's not looking good for them. They just lost to the Toronto Raptors without Paul George. They should have won that game. Toronto Raptors are actually a very good team, but I believe that the Nets should have won, especially if they had Paul George, they would have won. And that's just the first game without him right there. That's just they're not a contender anymore. It's not looking good.
Well, and it's interesting. It's interesting that you make that. Oh no, go ahead.
The injury is not that good either. It's a bone marrow injury. It's called a bone marrow lesion. It's something with your ankle. It's like you fractured your ankle before and it comes back to like haunt you. Does not sound good.
So definitely with them saying indefinitely, it sounds like as you mentioned that it could be something long term. Now, you talk about that they are no longer a contender, but when we look at this Western Conference, outside of the Jazz, the Lakers, the Clippers, there's not really a strong team out there in the West. I know the Phoenix Suns are trying to come up behind the Spurs. The Nuggets are trying to define themselves right now in that West. So you do still, even though they are in that top three of the runners,
just like number one contender. Like most people like put like the Lakers and Clippers. Oh, they're gonna face each other. But without Paul George, I feel like they're missing that one piece that a lot of other teams have. Like the Toronto Raptors, they just lost them. I feel like the Toronto Raptors probably have a little more pieces than the Nets right now.
So then, with this being the current situation here, as we roll out the Clippers, then and hopefully Paul George can come back stronger and help them make a run. So if we're looking at the Jazz and the Lakers right now, who is your favorite in the West?
I would say the Jazz right now. The Jazz are looking really good. They just won against the Hornets by like 20 points. The Hornets are a solid team too. People take them out of consideration. They've been building a great team. Recently, they have LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Devontae Graham. They're looking like a solid team, and the Jazz just tore them apart. LaMelo had his career night again with 30 or more points. And it didn't even make a difference because the Jazz just kept hitting threes after threes after threes.
To look at the West right now, of course, a lot of people would favor the Lakers, but you hear it here on the point, everybody, as we're looking at the Jazz to be the favorites coming out of the West, as the Clippers are going to take.
Whoa! I thought you meant just like Eastern Conference. Oh, the Lakers gonna win. Lakers are gonna win. I misheard your question, RJ.
Oh, so you're still on the Lakers bandwagon. You don't think the Jazz are going to carry all the way through?
Oh yeah, Lakers. LeBron all the way. Like I thought you were talking about like who's gonna face the Lakers because that's the ultimate thing. Like no one's gonna get past the Lakers. Like they're such a solid team with Anthony Davis, LeBron James,
So
Marcus.
you're feeling repeat then? Are you feeling a repeat for the Lakers?
Oh, repeat for the Lakers easily. It's without Paul George. If Paul George comes back for playoffs, they might have a tough thing for the Western Conference. But if he doesn't, they're probably just gonna. It's probably gonna be looking like the COVID season last year. They're just gonna win it terribly again.
Well, great predictions here on the point. Then you hear it right here. It's not the Jazz, everybody. It is the Lakers. The Lakers and the Jazz likely to face off now, moving towards the playoffs as that final spot to get through. But you heard it here. It is likely to be the Lakers as Brett predicts them to move on and potentially get another repeat this year. And now over to IUP news. Men's and women's swimming each won again over the weekend as the women won 168-9 and the men 151-13. Paige Mikesell was again the highlight for the women's team as the junior reached an NCAA Division II B standard time in the 100 butterfly with a time of 55:50, her second B time of the season. A great run of events for IUP as this is their second win of the season and their first home event since March of 2020. So definitely something huge for them to feel that. Up next, IUP will continue a home stretch as they will host Gannon on Saturday, February 13th. And now with some IUP tennis news, I will send it over to Brett.
And thank you, RJ. The IUP women's tennis team opens the 2021 season ranked number 24 in the Oracle ITA Division II Top 25 preseason coaches poll. And they open up against Youngstown State February 13th.
And to close out IUP sporting news, the football team added on 9 Pennsylvania players to their roster as they look to the fall 2021 season. Of these 9 players, 6 of them are offensive, as we have a running back, 2 quarterbacks, 2 offensive linemen, and a wide receiver. It'll be very interesting to see how these players have a role or try to make a spot on this team in the season this fall, and we will have more of that coming to you soon as the season approaches. All right, everyone, and we thank you for tuning into our third week here of the Point Podcast, brought to you by the Indiana University of Pennsylvania and the Penn. We hope we brought you plenty of information and plenty of controversy about the various things, as we talked about TJ Watt, Paul George, the Super Bowl, and various IUP athletics. Make sure to tune back into us next week as we come at you with much more sports.